So I'm going to speak about immersive media for science, journalism, and communication, which is a topic I've been researching and working a lot around in the last years. Maybe real quick about my topics. As Peter said, I'm a science and reportage journalist, so I really like the long-form narrative storytelling things, especially because I think it helps people a lot to understand and to be interested in the topics. And my main topics are everything around technology, AI, virtual reality, but of course I do reporting from other countries too, and data journalism is another really important and interesting topic. So with virtual reality, how it all started, I think that's important because at the same time, it shows you, it showed me immediately when I tried it the first time, the potential of virtual reality. So I started, I think 4 years ago, something like that. And I went to, I think it was 2016, it's maybe even 5 years or even longer. So I jumped, I had heard that there is a social virtual reality, and because I'm not a gamer, so far I had thought this is nothing that's interesting for me because I don't play games, but I heard that there's a social meeting option as well in virtual reality where you can meet real people. Of course, you see them only as avatars, and I really wanted to try that. And so this is what happened when I jumped into virtual reality the first time. And this is an app called Allspace VR. So it's one of 5 or 6 social VR meeting platforms. And I met a friend there. She's Sana. So the violet one is Sana and the blue one is me. And really from the first time we met, I think we liked each other and had a lot of discussions in VR and tried out many things. So this is another thing I found really fascinating, that you only can talk as we do here now, but you can as well play together, experience things, go for a walk and things like that. So we did this quite a lot. But already the second day I was there, I met this guy, or someone like this guy. So it was a big red man who was approaching me really fast and came really near towards my body. So this was the first thing I realized. Although I knew that this is not my body, this is just an avatar, it feels totally real. And it feels, if someone is coming too near to you in VR, you really feel that there's not enough space, although this space is just virtual as far as I thought so far. But this red man didn't stop, so he approached me, he grabbed my chest, and this was really the first time when I realized, wow, this is not reality. This is just another kind of reality, because I really felt like this is my body, and I really can feel that this is too much. So this was sexual harassment in virtual reality already on the second day, and many women I met afterwards had similar experiences. So this is totally not rare, but at the same time it shows how real this reality is. So this is Sana's room, my friend Sana, the violet one. She had built her own room where she invited me, and you can see that nice little fire in the background. And we really spent a lot of time besides that fire discussing about our lives. So I found out that Sana is from Kuwait City. She's a strong believing Muslim. And I was really curious to learn more about that, because so far I had many questions around religion, and this was a situation where we could talk really openly. And you can see that red man standing with us, his name was Evildoer in VR, although he wasn't evil at all, he was really nice, so he did many nice things, and he helped Sana to build that fire, because there was a technical problem that it wasn't visible in all headsets, especially not in her headset, so he helped her to build it in a way that everybody could see the fire. And when we were sitting near the fire and talking about everything, I really could feel even the warmth of the fire and the warmth of Sana herself, of her body. So this is just a picture of all kinds of avatars you can use in VR. So it's not only those robot-likes you saw that Sana and I had. There are, and in the meantime, there are many more. There are some more like people like comic style avatars too. yeah, and there was another experience where I realized, wow, how real can this place be? This is when I saw this cake, which is okay. This is the only thing that isn't real. So you really cannot eat that cake, which is sad because it looks really good. But this was a cake that Ben made for Shu, and Ben and Shu got engaged in virtual reality. So they met there, and this was their engagement party where he made this virtual cake, and he made a whole house for her in VR where they could meet up and invite their friends and meet with us too. Then I met Crystal, who is again the violet one, and you can see that many people, of course, look similar in VR. But this is not confusing at all because you can hear their voice, which is totally clear. So I always knew who is Sana and who is Crystal. You can see how they move their heads and how they move their arms if they have controllers. And this is really something that makes people really individual. So this was something I found really interesting too, to see that although this is just avatars, everybody is really individual, and you even listen more to their voices, and you can even find out through their voices what kind of mood they are in right now and how they feel, and yeah, if they're tired or awake and things like that. That was really interesting. But I was still thinking a lot about how did that happen with that? How does it feel so real? How can this kind of avatars which look so robot-like, how can they feel like my body? So I asked a philosopher who's working a lot around that, who is Thomas Metzinger. He's based in Mainz. And he has been working a lot with virtual reality already. And he was really happy to have the chance to have now VR for everybody. So this headset that many people can try it out. And he said, so if you have a participant and he has a headset on his head and sees himself filmed from his back. So you see the camera here in the picture, and this is the real participant, and this is in front of him the virtual own body that he is seeing because it's filmed from backwards. And if you touch him on his back, he sees himself from behind, and even sees himself touched. He feels a bit like being outside of his own body and inside of this virtual representation of his body. And this was what was new at that time. What Metzinger could show that you even can do this with the fake body. So you can kind of beam people's consciousness into another body, and they feel like this is my body. And he proved it with this, which is another kind like this. It's Gummihand experiment in German, and I absolutely don't know the translation. But so far it was only showed with just one hand, and now they can show it with a full body. And of course, Thomas Metzinger asked me the question, how real is this reality? And I asked him, of course. So seeing that virtual reality can feel so real, how can we know that this outside reality here is existing at all? And he pointed to his red couch in his office and said, so how real is this couch? And of course, if someone, especially a philosopher, asks these kind of things, the answer is, it's not real. And this is what he said. So he said, of course, it's real and you can sit on it, but the color and the shape, these are all just waves that come into our eyes. And what does make the couch real is just our brain. So it's just an interpretation of reality. So that means, he said, he thinks the outside world does exist, but it's not as real as we might think. It's much more complicated, and it's individual depending on how your brain interprets the signals, like the signals of the red color. And for me, of course, the question was, if this is so real, how real are the people I met? So, for example, Ben and Shu, who got engaged, they already had told me that they had met the first time in virtual reality and decided to get engaged before they had met in the so-called real life, and this was real enough for them. But my parents and my family and my friends, so everybody said, well, you are hanging around in social VR so much, and this is just this internet, and people are not who they pretend they are. this is not real. And so I felt like I have to prove that this is real, because I really felt it's real. So I went to visit all those people I had met in virtual reality. And this is where I met Ben, so the guy who built this lovely house for Shu. I met him in Atlanta, and I really found already the colors in these two pictures, like with this this house he had built and the reality, are so similar. And of course, Ben was real. We met in this barbecue place, and he told me many things about his life in the material reality and in virtual reality. And he said his problem in the material reality is that he has to move a lot because of his job, and he doesn't have friends because of that. And he has his friends and his social life completely in social VR. And this is where he met even Shu, his girlfriend, who he wanted to marry at that time. Later, they are separated now again, but at the time when I was visiting him, he was just engaged, and he was really angry about the material world and all the problems it has. For example, distance is because Shu was living in London at that time, and he was living in the US, and he had visited her the first time a few days ago when I met him, and he said it was 9 hours flight. It was so long, and he wasn't. So before he had tried to meet her in real life, he didn't know that, or it didn't feel like she's so far away. But now that he knew how far it is, and of course he knew it before in theory, but when he felt how far it is, he realized how far away she is. And in VR, it was just like she was really just there, and it was near. And I met my friend Sana in Kuwait City, who was really, this was the most interesting experience for myself, because Sana was the one I spent most of my time with in VR, and we had so many interesting discussions. And at the same time, she was so different compared to me. So I was really curious if how it would be with her. I wasn't even sure if she would show up, because she's really shy, and she told me many times before, oh, I'm not sure if this is really good if you come to my real life. And she was really sad as well in virtual reality, or kind of always really, she had thought a lot about life and everything, and I felt like she is there's something why she is sad. But she didn't want to talk about that in VR, and only when I came to her real life, I found out, or she told me that she is a widow, and that's why that's part of that, why she is so sad or thinking about life a lot. And this is where her husband died in the Iraq war, and she showed me that he was on one of these signs where they think of their fighters in the Iraq war. And I visited Katz in his real life, and Katz is someone, and this is where I ended up in Spokane in the US, where I met Katz. He's in virtual reality. He was always a bit. So it was hard to grab him or to find out who he is real. So he was really always making jokes in VR. He knew all the great things you can do there. You could jump with him on trees, for example. He showed me how to jump down from trees in all space VR, which was a lot of fun. And he beamed from here to there, and he could change his avatars. He was really dynamic, and sometimes I even wasn't able to catch up with him. But he always said things like, in real life, I'm just an old man, I'm really sick, I'm going to die in a few years. And nobody from our friends in VR was sure if this is really true, and because he was telling it to them for quite some time already. And so there was always a question, is he really, what is the thing with him? Is he really sick? And so I visited him in Spokane, and this was already feeling really, so if you think about how real is virtual reality, for me this visit in this city was much more unreal. So I met Katz, and we did we walked around a bit in his city, and it was indeed, I realized that he is really sick, so it was hard for him to walk. He had to breathe heavily when we walked outside. He took medications all of the time. And he was broke, so he didn't have money at all, because he lost his job, because he is sick and he has problems with his heart. So these stories were true, and he was telling us. And I was there for 3 days, and I realized that really his real life isn't really not easy, because it was hard for him to walk around and to move. And normally when I wasn't there, he would just sit at home. He was living in a really, really small, really dark apartment. He couldn't afford anything else. And he normally would just sit inside and work with his computer, or be inside his computer in this virtual reality. So I realized that his virtual life is much more rich and much more, he has really social contacts, he has fun, and in his real life it was really hard and sad for him too. So this was a journey I did around 2 years ago, when I realized, so virtual reality is real for some people. It's even it's their chosen reality and not the material reality, because for some people the material reality is just not the right thing to live in. And although this is sad, of course, and I would wish them to be more happy in real life, I think this is great that they found this solution, and that they have a good life in virtual reality. And so when I realized that how many things you can do in VR and how real this is, of course, I wondered, so what can we do with that in journalism, or why is it promising for journalism? And I found especially two aspects really promising, besides that it is really real, which I already told you. So I think it's promising because it really opens filter bubbles. So I never would have met someone like Sana in my real life, or at least chances are not really high. And I would never have had the chance to talk so openly about all the questions I had about religion. And it brings people together. So really people spoke in VR together about things they wouldn't have done in real life. So I met, for example, many people who were really skeptical about journalists, who had many questions about journalism, and were where I really felt, okay, there is a problem with trust. And I realized it helps a lot to talk to them directly in virtual reality. And of course, it's real. It's immediate and real. This is what I found really, especially when I visited Sana. So, and all these aspects are really perfect for journalism. But at the same time, I realized journalism is not that creative so far using virtual reality. So when I had thought about all the things, I thought, okay, we really have to use it. We have to use social virtual reality. And I started to try some things, and I realized I caught myself by not being really creative. So for example, I started this talk show. So this is, I think you can see me sitting here interviewing some people. But then I realized, okay, a talk show where people just sitting on their seats and observing passively what we are talking about is really nothing we need VR for. This is something that works really great in TV. So we don't need virtual reality. But then I realized that this is something that happens quite often, that people just think, so what are we doing so far? Can we kind of move that in VR and just use a new technology for an old idea without thinking about what the new technology can add to that, or maybe to start from the other perspective. So what problems does this new technology solve that we have in journalism? So I did some research. I tried out many things. This is something, again, from Space VR. So they became kind of an event social VR platform. So you can see, you can even go and meditate there, although I think this is not the right space to meditate. So for me, really, real life is still, or material life is enough to meditate. But of course, what you can sing and dance in VR. But of course, what I found really interesting is this educators in social VR, because this is something that is near towards my topic, of course. So I tried things out. I tried an open mic night and did some singing, which was a lot of fun. I did a journalism meetup in VR, which is that one where we discussed VR for journalism. And then, of course, I visited those educators in VR. And I was really frustrated when I saw that, because this is exactly what I found. What they are doing is exactly what they do in real life. So they have like a classroom, and people can go in and sit on a seat, and the teacher is standing in front and teaching like in real life, which is exactly not what VR can help us with, right? This is exactly not what you need VR for. And I felt like this is the equivalent of 360-degree journalism, because this is, for me, this was about the same. There was a big hype and movement around 360 videos in journalism. And in the end, it's just that you can, of course, watch it in 3D with a headset. But in the end, there's still just one perspective that is really interesting. So everything is happening in one direction. You don't need, in the end, in most of the 360 videos, and I'm happy to learn other things, but in my experience in most of the 360 videos in science, journalism, and communication, it's not interesting to have this 360 perspective. And in addition, of course, you are, as a visitor or as the audience, you are just flying inside the scene like a ghost. People of course don't see you, but this is still strange. I still feel strange, like this hidden observer in 360 videos. You're at the same time in the middle of the happening, but at the same time you are just not really there. So I felt like we really need to think about what can this technology do for us, and only the second step should be thinking of how we can use that to make journalism or communication with that. And the first thoughts I had is it needs to be social and interactive. So this is really the opposite of this 360 experiences, which are really passive. You can just watch them, and it's not social. It's just you're doing it on your own. You don't have the chance to talk to other people while doing that. There's no interaction. Yeah, as I said, we should not just copy our old ideas one-to-one into the new technology. And as Peter said in the beginning, I had a fellowship at MIT, the Knight Science Journalism Fellowship, and I used that to do a lot of research around these questions. And the main question is, of course, which Chris Dede asked as well, who is a professor at Harvard Graduate School of Education. If VR is the answer, then what is the question? And it was really interesting for me to visit this Graduate School of Education, because they work a lot around, or what means a lot? Of course, it's a big school and Harvard is a big institution, but some people in Harvard do work around VR. And I felt education is the most, has many connections to journalism or to communication. It's as well about bringing information to the people, helping people to think about the world. So I did some seminars with them and explored what they are doing. And this helped me to find out what problems does VR solve. So what they did, for example, there are these ruins of Palmyra in Syria, which are as you can see, not really in the shape they were before. But it's an important historical site, and they wanted to make it accessible to students. So they built it in VR, which is not, at the same time, not surprising, right? But I found this is a use case. So you have something that is not existing anymore in reality. This is a use case that makes sense to rebuild it in virtual reality if you really want to have it still accessible to people. And at the same time, of course, it's even more accessible because you don't have to travel to Syria, which might be even dangerous. So they built it, but they didn't make it a passive experience. They then went there with students and with students from, I think this was China and the US. So they made an intercultural meetup inside this Palmyra, this VR Palmyra site. So at the same time, they had an interactive meeting. They could exchange about what they were seeing, and they could explore the site and learn about his historic, his role and everything. Another researcher tried to find out how much students learn about the human body when they use virtual reality. or compared, I think the control group was just learning with traditional school books and things like that. And he said they learned, so their learning was more sustainable because they could interact with the things. So, for example, in this bones, you could take them in your hand, turn them around, and just explore them, and that helps people a lot to learn and to keep the things in your head. And this is nothing new, right? So learning theory, I've been writing about learning and digitization for quite a time. And this is what I always hear from learning researchers, that you should learn interactively. You should be able to touch things, to explore things yourself, and that helps you to learn. And is, in addition, it's more fun than just reading it. And of course, I met many people who are coming from this VR side. So this is Philip Rosedale. He's the founder of Second Life. So he had this idea that we could meet up in a digital reality and have this as just another reality is really old. And he was, of course, really happy that when virtual reality now became more and more accessible, because the headsets became cheaper and smaller and everything. So he told me, well, in future, we will just choose our reality. So we won't be here in this material reality. By default, we can just choose where we want to live. This is maybe a bit far, but, and of course, I wondered, so if this is everything so easy and we can choose, so why don't people do that? Because I guess you might know that there was always, the hype was always bigger than the reality in virtual reality. So they were always expecting more people to have headsets than there were people buying those headsets. So I met another researcher at MIT who did some research around that. And I think this was really the first time I saw someone who did not hand the headsets to computer science students, for example, so whose test persons were just really normal people and not people who are already open towards computers and things like that. And he gave them the headsets just to take them home for a few weeks and told them a few apps they could just try and use them. And his goal was to find out, do they like the technology? And you can see what he found out. Some people said it feels solitary, and they were worried about how it looks if you have a headset on your head. And this is something really totally underestimated by the VR community so far, because of course these people don't think that it looks ridiculous. They just think it's, wow, I'm inside in this headset and it's cool. Someone said there's no right time to use it. And someone said you need sorry, I closed my document. It feels like you are isolated from other people. So people really want to have it in a social VR in a social way. And this is something really interesting, because this is something, of course, social VR is solving, right? You are not alone. You are using social VR in order to meet other people, and you are not alone and isolated. And of course, the other thing is the worries that people think it looks ridiculous are still something we have to take seriously. But this could mean that we maybe should look towards future smaller headsets, or to location-based virtual reality, which is really promising too. So where people go to a location and can use it there, which is at the same time more social by default. And then, of course, when I was already talking right now about the smaller headsets, the next question is augmented reality the solution? And there was kind of a hype too in journalism. New York Times had a kind of a big section with VR journalists, but at the same time you can see they hide it at the very bottom of their list of sections. Immersive AR, VR, and as far as I know, they now have, it's much smaller now. That this was, I think, 2 or 3 years ago when it was really big. And I tried some of these augmented reality things they offered, and these all work with just your mobile phone. So you don't need a headset, you can just use your mobile phone. So for example, there was one experience about this cave in Thailand where people were stuck and couldn't come out anymore. I think it were students. And they had the idea they can help us to feel how small everything was. So you can see this is in the background, you can see my office, and this is the screen of my mobile phone when I was using this AR experience, and they tried to help me to understand how small the cave was at this point. And this kind of works, but at the same time, I felt like I still feel more like I'm just in my office and staring at my screen, and there's of course this small window. Another one is they did build the moon landing, where they put real photographs, so you could put the moon on your floor, and when you went nearer to those pictures, you could see real photographs from the moon landing. And the latest thing I saw, no, that's not the latest thing, but the latest thing I saw was about bed bugs. So you could put some bed bugs in your own bed. And they looked really scary, but at the same time, I really had to work a lot to have the perspective right and to get them really to life. So it just takes, for me, it took about an hour to make it working. And I don't have an old mobile phone. So even with the new technology, it's still hard. And I always felt like this is just, I'm looking on my mobile phone, there's so much around me. For me, it was not immersive enough. And looks like for the audience of the New York Times, it didn't work too, because I don't know if they stopped the whole thing, but at least it's much smaller. I think they laid people off or put them in other sections. So my conclusion of this is really that augmented reality only works when we have augmented reality glasses. And as we know, right now, they are not perfect. So I think the dream where we want the real dream with AR glasses is at some point to have these kind of things. So this is hologram. So people don't use glasses for that, but this was a talk where a hologram was beamed in front of the audience. And I loved that a lot, because it really feels like, okay, this is maybe beaming is coming true with this technology, but of course it's totally expensive, it's totally complicated. This speaker had to move to a special lab where he could give his talk. But then, at least as far as everybody told me, it felt real. Like someone was standing in front of the audience, he was looking into their eyes, and he felt like he could see the audience and see their eyes too, which is, by the way, something I really miss right now, that I don't see anybody. So just in case someone wants to turn on the camera, and thanks, Peter. I love to see people's eyes. Yeah, but this is nothing that is possible to do just in everyday life. It's really expensive and complicated. I'm not sure if this is really possible to make it accessible for all of us. This is what Microsoft Research told us what their headset could be in the future, and they called it holoportation. And there was a film which looked like so this man was the story was, this man is sitting in a hotel, he has to travel for his business, and he's missing his daughter, and he's putting on his headset, and then his daughter can come and visit him. But when you see, so this is the center of the picture, and for me it felt like, wow, this is really something I want to have, because I often miss people because I'm somewhere else. But in the end, you see that this daughter has to sit, of course, in a special situation. She doesn't see her dad at all, so she's speaking to a ghost who is talking from the side of the walls. And of course, the daughter doesn't look like this for him too. You see her on the left bottom corner. This is the picture, the best picture you could get with a HoloLens, which is the headset of Microsoft. So there was a lot of nice stories around augmented reality headsets and how they could bring holoportation to all of our lives. And this would be really cool, but so far it's not solved. And I thought a lot about that, and I think there is no solution to have holograms or holoportation in our real lives. So that's why I still stick with virtual reality so far, although I think AR can bring some great things. And I think this is something many of you have thought of in the last 2 years, that the pandemic really showed us the limitations of this video conference things we are doing right now. I was this was really still the beginning of the pandemic. I think it was April 2020. There was a conference in the US, the IEEE Virtual Reality Conference, and I was really looking forward to that conference because, of course, it was planned to be in real life. Although it is a VR conference, the plan was to have it, I think, at Georgia Tech. And I was really, I couldn't wait to go there because, of course, it's not far away from MIT and Boston. And then the pandemic came, and then this was the first conference I visited completely in virtual reality. So they put just the whole thing into VR. And this was already in the beginning of the pandemic, after a few weeks of Zoom conferences, was such a relief to be in a real world. So you can see here the audience. So I was standing somewhere there with other people. You can watch. So the only solution, of course, if you want to see people's faces, is to have like a streaming into virtual reality. What they did in that case. So the talks were streamed into VR, but you could stand there with other people and you could talk with them about the talk, for example, you are watching together, and you could have this interaction. And then there was a poster presentation, and this was completely inside virtual reality. So you can see someone showing her poster there. I was standing there with someone else talking about the poster. You could just walk around in the room and think about where I want to go. You could listen. You could hear that people were talking here and there about different topics. And you could just decide, wow, this sounds interesting, what they are talking about. I just go into that corner and join them. And if it's not interesting anymore, you could just move on. This is how you just, of course, I think everybody of you knows how poster presentations work in real life. And this was really a poster presentation in VR that felt a lot like real life, and especially in the pandemic, I was so happy that we could have this real kind of real life interaction. And of course, from my perspective, if there's a material poster presentation, I would always go there. But if you don't meet in person, I think this is the second best alternative. And so I decided to go on with my own social VR project, which I developed at MIT. And as I told you before, I had the idea that you could use, or we should use VR, for example, for things you cannot feel or see in real life. For example, quantum entanglement. So I had tried to write, or I wrote a few articles about quantum physics, and it was really hard. First time it was hard for me to really get the topic, and it's just counterintuitive, as I think many of you know. And at the second time, it's really hard to explain it if you only have words, because you need there's so much you need to explain to make it accessible. And you can see, of course, if you Google that and look for images, it's totally abstract, of course, because you cannot see it in real life. So I met with a physicist from MIT. Here he is called Toptimel, and we met on a nice rooftop in virtual reality, and we met, of course, in real life too, because he was there at MIT too, and talked about how we could use VR to make this quantum physics more understandable. And of course, Harvard and MIT is a perfect place because, for example, at Harvard, they have visualization lab, and they have all kinds of VR headsets. They have people who know a lot about this. So it was really, was like a paradise for a technology journalist like, who am I? So we went and did a prototype, which is here. So you can see particles. And as I said, it's about quantum physics. So the first idea was to show people a model they could even touch in VR and they could explore. And of course, this is still a model because it's just not visible. Like, and we don't know how it looks in reality. It's really just a model, but a model that the physicist said is good enough and real and true enough for people to show it to the people and to let them explore. And we even had something like here, Schrdingers Box. So this is a box where we explored the entanglement. And as you maybe know, as long as the box is closed, the particles haven't decided yet for one or the other position. And as soon as you start to measure the thing, this is what a quantum physicist, of course, work on, and which is the challenge for quantum physicists. As soon as you measure, they decide for a position, but this superposition where it's not clear where they are is only existing when nobody looks. And of course, in VR, you can change that. So we could close the box and then just see into the box, and these particles didn't know that we were looking at them. And we could open the box and see what happens. And then, of course, because entanglement even works across really long distances, this is what Einstein really found complicated to understand and didn't like. He said spukhafte Fernwirkung about that, and I forgot how the translation is. Spooky, yeah. Einstein found it spooky. So to show that this still even works, we had even beaming in our VR world. So you see, there was one platform on top of the Earth, and the other part of the group could beam together with the box, with Schrdingers Box, could beam to Mars. And then we could, of course, we could see each other because we made it in a way that we could, which is of course not real too, but we could show each other. So this is now in this stage and this is now in this stage. So we could show that entanglement works across distances, even across really big distances. And what we and our visitors really liked a lot is that was this interactive part, so that you could really meet up, you could open the box, people could take the box and beam with the box to Mars. They could ask, so I was there as a journalist, I did an interview with the expert, the quantum physicist, but the audience could ask him as well. So they could, at the same time, it was a really transparent way of journalism. So they could see how I would interview him, and they could, of course, interact with him too. So, and I think these are things, just as a few ideas, that might help us to regain trust or to overcome this crisis of missing trust in the public, is to have direct interaction, to work as transparent as possible, and and of course to make it interactive and to make learning kind of fun. And recently I thought about who else can inspire us, or where can we look to see more interesting ways where people use immersive media for education, for communication, or for journalism. And I really think a field where we didn't look too much so far, which is really inspiring, is this interactive media artists. So for example, I would just like to present you two examples that were really inspiring for me, and that could help us to think about how we can use these technologies to make to convey our topics and to make it fun and to help people to have it stick in their head, to have it to learn in a sustainable way. So for that, I have to show you some YouTube. So this is Kusunda. Okay, and the idea was this is now in the beginning, but it isn't, but I can go there.
Gilangi mat oiche, gilangi mat oiche, akpe togda gilang mangji.
अदराजमा खाने बस्ने खाने पिने कुरो हुन्छ अब विश्वको भाषा मलाई कसो लाग्यो नराम्रो लाग्छ आफ्नो भाषाबाट बोल्न पाएपछि तपाईले एकदम तन्न सुन्ने कुरो हुन्छ
यो कुसुन्डा भाषा रहेन भने चाहिँ किन नेपालमा कुसुन्डा छ भन्ने पनि अस्तित्व रहँदैन यो कुसुन्डा भाषा संस्कृतिलाई चाहिँ एकदम पनि बचाउन सक्छु भन्ने चाहिँ मलाई एकदम पनि आँट पनि छ है
So you see that this is a experience with virtuality. They reconstructed the area where they did the research. So this is about a dying language. And what I really liked about it is that you can kind of fly into that place, and you can see how they live in this village. You can see those people and you can talk to them. But then there's another layer on top of it, because you can interact with them. And this is something I would like to show you in the next part of it. Sorry, there's always this button coming up.
The animated world of Kusunda was based on reference photographs that Felix and Gayatri took in Nepal, current photographs from their own research trip, but also historic photographs from Kusunda in their environment. We didn't want to recreate a photographic representation of the jungle and of the characters. Using tilt brush, we were able to capture the concept of Kusunda, the loss of history, the loss of memory and culture, by individual brush strokes and spaces to look through and gaps, wounds, so to say, in the history, and not closed shapes that would show a complete image. Kusunda kind of forced me to approach new animation techniques.
How to show the past, because these jungles and this lifestyle no longer exist. So we were very happy to work with tilt brush animations based on motion capture data.
Painting in virtual reality, using real-time techniques. And this was really a great chance for me to make a next step and to find a new fascination for animation itself. It's just fascinating to approach new stories, basically.
And what I really found interesting too, so this the first thing that they used tilt brush to fill the gaps, because of course it was important to them not to show things or to pretend that they know everything, and so they just filled the gaps, things that are not known, with tilt brush. And I think this is really interesting for science too, because I think or for other scientific topics too, because we often have the challenge as well, that there are things we don't know or uncertainties where we don't want to tell the people this is everything clear and we know that. And there's a small thing about the interaction as well, which is really interesting. So you could interact, or you can interact in this experience with your voice, because this is a dying language, and so the idea is that you learn this language, and of course not to learn it. This is more to get an idea for what this is about, to get an idea for the language.
In the community?
The main way in which you interact in the piece is through your voice. So you learn and speak certain Kusunda words in order to get further in the virtual reality narrative. This is because Kusunda, like many other indigenous languages, is rooted in oral traditions. And this is also what Hema wants. In fact, she explicitly mentions in the documentary that she wants audiences to engage with her mother tongue.
अब यो भिआरबाट यो गर्दाखेरि यो भिडियोहरू त्यो हेर्दाखेरि मान्छेलाई झट्ट हेर्दाखेरि अब यो हेरौँ के हो जस्तो लाग्ने के अनि यो यसले चाहिँ मान्छेलाई धेरै प्रभाव नै गर्छ जस्तो लाग्छ हजुर त्यो बीचमा शब्दहरू राखेपछि आफूले पनि बोल्ने भयो र यो यस्तो भन्दा रहेछन् भन्ने तिमीले पनि थाहा पाउने भयो दामै
Hema is very driven towards revitalizing her mother tongue, and the virtual reality project is just one aspect in the community's larger efforts at language revitalization.
Interesting as well is in that project that their protagonist died during they were working on that project. So there was an old lady who was the last speaker of this language, and she died in the middle of the works around that. And you could see there was one young man crying when he took off his headset. This was one of her grandchildren. And this is something the filmmakers told me, and I think that totally makes sense, that this is just, again, something you see how real this feels, right? Because he was visiting his mother in this virtual reality project, and her children and grandchildren still want to show people how this language, learn people about this language, because of course that's their culture, and it's interesting to see how many aspects of their lives the language conveys as well. And I would like to show you one last project, knowing that it's already approaching 12, but we started a bit later, and I hope you have some time for 2 more minutes. There's a group called Marshmallow Laser Feast who is doing really interesting and many science communication projects. And although they are not coming from science, they come more from this filmmaker perspective. I think they have really cool ideas how to make science more graspable and accessible for people. We Live in an Ocean of Air is one of their projects I liked a lot. And sorry. So this is location-based VR. So people, this was taking place in a museum, I think. So people could be there, visit this museum, and then they get a headset and even get a backpack with a computer inside, because it was really a big VR installation. So they had all the computing power on their backs, and then they could walk around in that museum and could see and interact with air. So they could even see their own breath, and they could see the breath of the other visitors. So they could interact with the other people via their breath, and they could see how the air is moving through trees too, and just learn a lot about air in the end. And I just really quick show you one last part of a movie about that, and then of course I can share the links afterwards, and you can watch that too.
They're big passion projects. I've been thinking about them for years, and this one is really at the forefront of this kind of new wave of immersive experiences. So you can kind of hack the senses and simulate worlds beyond the limits of human perception. So that's the area that we're really fascinated in, and so science kind of is our window to that world. But the way we often understand scientific stories is through text and images, but rarely as experiences, because they're not available to our senses. So with this piece here, it's really all about breath. And so if I could see breath rolling down my throat into my chest, it would define my lungs like upside down trees. My heartbeat pumps it round through my vascular system, and you'd see that oxygen passing through the branching networks into my hand. And so these things are happening all the time, but we just don't see them. And then the flip side of that is when I exhale, the carbon dioxide is inhaled by the plants, and it rolls in, and through the process of photosynthesis becomes the sugars that basically feed all of life in the food chain. So by revealing that connection, it puts us in this symbiotic relationship with the plant kingdom, which is happening all the time, but we're just not aware of it.
How long did it happen?
Yeah, and with that, I would just stop here. There's a lot more to say, but this is always the case. I'm never done with talking about virtual reality and immersive media. But I think we could maybe have time for a few questions now. Thank you so much for listening.